Good morning, campers. Welcome to Radio Camp Haplet, a Percy Jackson Reeling podcast. I'm your host, Zach.
And I'm B.
And this week we're at Chapter 12 of The Last Olympian. Rachel makes a bad deal. And when I mean by bad deal, I mean it's like the last 5 pages of this book. But yes, she does make a bad deal.
I totally forgot that Rachel was in the name of the chapter when I read this chapter. Because I just got so distracted by the other stuff going on with the big battle happening.
There are so many plots in this chapter that it's like hard to keep track. So I had to actually write them down on a note card, which is actually kind of funny for me.
I mean, it's not so much that I was like, oh, why is Rachel here? Once she showed up, I was like, oh, right, that was the name of the chapter. But there was like a really heavy focus on what was happening with Annabeth, the whole like sort of camp out of half-bloods who were at the Plaza Hotel. There was a lot of talk of like just the strategy of what the demigods are doing and how they're not doing so great. They're basically screwed.
Yeah. And there's also the spy, and also that Selena's trying to get Clarice to come back to help them because they need her. Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens.
And they're not too confident about that. And they're like, don't even want Selena around because she's kind of a liability because she's not like able to focus in like a battle situation. So like, okay, fine, go on this wild goose chase. Like, there is just like literally just a bunch of futile attempts to like play catch up against the enemy because everything they're doing doesn't seem to be working. It's just like they're losing people left and right. Grover shows up and gives bad news. It's just like literally every character just pops in to be like, hey, so things are going pretty badly, except for Annabeth, who's like literally languishing on like on a chaise lounge, like dying on a balcony. So like,
well, for me, when I look at this chapter, this kind of sums up the old saying that war is hell.
Yeah, it's
because that's pretty much what is happening. Is like there's people dying. Like this chapter opens up and they're trying to look for Michael Yu, who most likely is either dead
or who knows what's happening with Michael Yu, but
whatever happens to him. But even here, it's like you have the problem. They get to the Plaza Hotel and we find out that Annabeth has not only been stabbed really deeply, but also she's poisoned.
So there's a lot going on here.
Well, I think the funniest thing about this is this chapter kind of opens up and Percy makes it to the Plaza Hotel. And he says that it's kind of weird, like a bunch of demigods are always drawn here, like the Beatles and Alfred Hitchcock. And that's hilarious to me.
Here we go. Another one of Rick Riordan's patented, like, weird assertions that, like, every famous person is demigod. Or maybe not every famous person is a demigod, but, like, a lot of prominent figures in history have been demigods.
Well, this is where my brain kind of started, like, to flare up a little bit. And it's like, wait a second. Both the people they just called out are very, very British people that came from Britain.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, when is the switch from, like, Western civilization? Because you would imagine all the demigods would probably be, American in the sense of, like, they're born in America.
Right, because that's supposed to be, like, the seat of Western power and blah, blah, blah. That's, like, the whole point of why this book series takes place in America.
Yeah, and you, like, think of Alfred Hitchcock, who's very British, and you think of the Beatles, which is even more British.
Literally the British invasion. Like, that, yeah, I didn't even really think about it. It didn't occur to me to think of Alfred Hitchcock as representing that as well. Yeah, I wonder how that works. Like, if demigods are, like, born in England, why? And, like, how do they get to America? Do you know what I mean? Like, is that a plot hole or something? Do you have to be famous in America to be a demigod? There's, like, a lot of weird questions.
Well, no. To be a demigod, you have to have a godly parent and a mortal parent. B, I don't have to explain the Minotaurs and the Beast to you.
Would it just be, like, would it be typical for, like, a demigod to be born in England? Or, like, is that just... We don't ever hear about them. Do you know what I mean? We keep hearing about how, like, America's at war in a lot of ways, and, like, there's different gods and titans and monsters all fighting throughout America in various ways, but...
I'm going to say that Rick Riordan was kind of being, like, cutesy-wootsy about this. It's like, we'll have the Beatles because that's funny, and then you have Alfred Hitchcock. I don't think in the sense of, like, he was just trying to find some cute people to be in the book.
Right, because I don't exactly know how many people reading this book would, like, know much about Alfred Hitchcock. You know what I mean? It's kind of a weird cut.
Oh, I love Alfred Hitchcock. He's such a great guy. Though he'd probably be... People would probably think he'd be, like, the son of, like, Hades, but I think he'd probably be, like, a son of Nemesis.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, there's probably a lot of options for Hitchcock, but it's just, like... I guess maybe he was retroactively trying to think of people who frequented the plaza who would fit as demigods, and that's what happened, but it's like, it's kind of fascinating his choice sometimes of like what he decides like which famous person is a demigod.
And this is not even like a nitpick, it's just like an observation that I made, and maybe this is some big world building. Like, who knows? But I thought that was
Whenever
so
he does
interesting
that, it
because,
doesn't feel much like world building and it's more just like a fun reference. Do you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't
yeah.
like really pad it out with any detail or like sort of explanation why of like, oh yeah, this kind of makes sense. Like, here's why this person acted this way. And that sort of gives you a weird retcon of this real person's life to like see them as a demigod. Like, that could be interesting, but most of the time it's like, and Harriet Tubman, she sure was a demigod anyway, moving on. You know what I mean?
Well, then that's like, oh, look, didn't you know John Lennon was a demigod? And did you know Mark David Chapman was also a demigod? Like, oh, wait a second, there's a problem here.
Yeah. Oh my god. Well, I seriously doubt Mark David Chapman was a demigod. Oh geez, that he would be very much like Luke in that
You
case.
don't know, he could have known he was the son of Nemesis. We all know this.
Yeah.
He's got a revenge.
Yikes.
Yikes in the yard. But moving on a little bit, I actually think what Rick Riordan does here with this chapter with Percy Jackson and Annabeth is such a powerful scene, but also it's very gruesome, especially in the theater of the mind when he actually kind of describes her wound, but also like, he gets in like detail. She has like a deep gouge, and also the wound is like turning
Right, that
green.
description kind of got me because I guess she's been poisoned, but it sounds like gangrene or like a some sort of
A poison.
yeah, but
Poisoning.
I'm saying like tissue decay or something on a living person, which is kind of horrible to think about. It's very
She's getting
like
necrotic flesh.
yeah, like it kind of made me think of all the times that I've seen like scary displays either like on like the Discovery Channel or like I went to like the Mutter Museum with all like the weird preserved sick bodies. Like that's kind of the images it was conjuring.
Really, my first thought was kind of like, well, we gotta get Annabeth the bone saw.
Oh geez, like it was like the Civil War or something. It's like, well, I guess we'll cut off her stomach. That's not gonna work.
You know, there was some surgeon out there. Maybe they could survive without a stomach.
Maybe there'll just be a head, and it's like this, like Union soldier with like a head in a jar. I thought it might work. I don't know. I think that ghosts are in your blood.
Oh yeah, we gotta prescribe you this and this. Have you thought of this new thing called Coca-Cola? Mmm.
Yeah, delicious morphine. That'll solve your problems.
Or it's like old timey cough medicine. It's got like codeine in it. It's got chloroform in it. It's got all the good stuff that you will forget that you have a cough for about 60 years.
Yeah, it's true. It's like I remember when I had a cough once. Now I don't know my name.
But I think with this chapter, I think this opening part's actually very sweet and tender because it's the trope again. It's like, oh, I love you. I'm going to give you a kiss when I get back. And of course, she's like almost mortally wounded. I was expecting her to almost have like, if Rick Riordan really wanted to pull like a George R. Martin, this is where he probably would have killed Annabeth right there and then.
Yeah, but that isn't gonna happen here. I definitely don't think that she's gonna die because from what is described later, she's doing okay. She's like pretty messed up, but she's projected to make a recovery.
It's funny because you think about it, like they use like a magical solution, but she needs like actual
Like
medical medicine.
Yeah, well, because this is a fun part where, who was it that he grabbed from the other cabin?
You got the Stoll brothers.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Stoll brothers, but who like directs them
It's
to
Travis.
the Dwayne Reed? Yeah, is just like, oh yeah, there's a Dwayne Reed down the road. Go get a bunch of medicine.
Is that like a Walgreens? I'm
Yeah,
going to guess and say.
yeah, it's like a CVS or something. It's the same thing, but for some reason in New York City, Dwayne Reed's are really common. I don't ever see them up here, but there's a lot in like Manhattan.
For me, it's so interesting that, they've used magical solutions, like they've used nectar, they've used anything they can, except now they have to rely on technology from mortals. They actually need medicine, which is so interesting to me.
Yeah, it sort of makes me think of like all those like Harry Potter kind of headcanons and jokes about how like they might be so stuck in their ways that they like sort of discount like Muggle technology. Like, oh, we have plumbing. Let's not get into the
No, we don't have
headcanon
to do
reason
that.
of what they did before plumbing, but you know what I mean.
Like telephones and things that like seem like rational things that people would use.
Right, but it's like, oh, I have magic, so I don't need that or whatever. So it is kind of interesting that like the demigod culture is integrated enough with mortal culture that they're like, oh, I guess I need Bactine, you know?
But here I like that, and also when it comes to this chapter, this is so hard to read sometimes because you're thinking of like a kid that can't really do anything, like a person's like dying, like you have no way of like really helping them. Like most people are trying, but they still need a solution, and it's interesting because even in like a war setting, like not going to spoil 1917, but there's a part in that movie that reminded me a lot of this chapter where someone needs medical attention, and it's just like, oh my god, you might think like a wound might be like not serious, but it's serious.
It has like the energy of any kind of like post battle recovery scene where they're like not at like a proper medical facility, but they're kind of trying to make do, like kind of like I said, like that sort of like Civil War feeling of like them just sort of doing quick triage. And like they even said, what is it, using like silk draperies to bandage their
Anything they
wounds.
can
Yeah,
use
they're
to
just
like
kind of like
put pressure on the
MacGyvering
wound.
stuff to heal each other. Even Percy says it's like not really the most strategically smart place to be in the plaza. It's not the tallest place, and it's also not exactly like the center of like maybe a hospital would have been a good choice. You know what I mean? Like they would have had medical supplies.
But this is the best that they can do. But it's interesting because this is the chapter as well as that Annabeth is trying to like calm down Percy, and he's like freaking out. And he's like, oh my god, I can't believe you literally took a knife from me. I would have done the exact same thing for you. Though he kind of like was like, how did you know about my special spot?
Like my death spot, yeah.
And she's like, I didn't know. I just
guess
had like
she
a bad
doesn't
feeling
know.
about
Yeah,
this.
exactly. She got like this weird spidey sense that he was gonna die, but she didn't exactly know that that's what was gonna happen. So it was less like she was guessing where his weakness was, and more just like, oh, Percy's in danger for whatever reason. This person is trying to stab him. I don't even know if in battle in the moment I would be thinking like, oh right, Percy's like impervious to all of this, I shouldn't worry about him ever. I would still probably try to stop him from getting stabbed.
Well, it's also reflexes, but also again, I guess this is, remember they all have ADHD, so they have battle reflexes. So like as someone trying to stab at them is gonna be quicker.
Right, so maybe she wasn't exactly thinking it through like, oh yeah, if he gets stabbed he'll be fine. The feeling is kind of interesting because it sounds like it's more than just like an intuition like friend thing of like the impulse to protect him, but it's like something more,
It's almost as if the
supernatural.
fates decided that Percy Jackson needed to be saved at that moment.
Right, exactly. It feels more like the hand of fate is like moving Annabeth to like protect him in some way, which is kind of interesting because you kind of never know the more like subtle types of magic and stuff going on. We're like, okay, like when people make decisions in these books, sometimes I wonder like what's pushing them to make those decisions.
See, that's an interesting facet, especially with these books, because we have the theory, or I guess the idea of the fates, and how, you see someone get their string snipped and that's all over for them. Like it could be today, it could be from many years from now, but you have like all these impulses, especially in this chapter once we get to Delphi and we get to like Hades. Like there's a lot of things, like there's higher beings above the higher beings, which is so cool to me.
I don't know. They're getting at something beyond like Annabeth just being Percy's friend, but I don't know if they'll ever like explain quite what was happening there. Maybe they will explain what was happening.
Is this a Damon Lindelof? It's like a mystery box. It's like Lost.
It's also like interesting because then you like think about how strategically important it would be to know where that spot is. Is it better that Annabeth knows now? I feel like it's bad now that Percy has said it out loud, because he was kind of like, it was weird, like he's like, oh, how'd you know it was there? And then she didn't really know what he was talking about, and he had to explain, oh, well, that's where my weakness was, on the small of my back. And he's kind of whispering, which I mean, I guess that's all you can do, but I don't know, I just got a really bad feeling that he would vocalize that at all, especially with a spy around. There wasn't any indication that there was a spy there that second, but like now I'm like, wait, is Annabeth the spy? That wouldn't make sense, but I'm getting all sorts of weird paranoid vibes.
Here's the thing though, it's like 2 can keep a secret, 3 start to talk.
Yeah, and I don't know who would have heard him. I mean, again, it could have been the spy, like lurking somewhere that like wasn't explained in the book until later.
For some reason, I'm imagining it's like the person's behind like a bush, like a fake bush, and you still see them.
Yeah, I feel like that is kind of spies in a lot of like media, where it's just like, oh, I'm just gonna like stand behind this ledge and eavesdrop every time. It's like, I guess these kids aren't really good at like casing their surroundings to make sure they're alone. before they reveal like really deadly, dangerous information to each other.
Well, this is also like a piece of information that Percy Jackson shouldn't have given to Annabeth because it doesn't seem like something she should be privy of just in case something were to happen, like if she gets captured.
Right, it's sort of like a double blind thing. It's like even if he does trust her completely and he even says like, "Oh, if I could trust anyone, I could trust her." There's so many circumstances where that would still be a bad idea. Whether it's someone overhearing them or like that's not really Annabeth. I'm not saying it's not, but there's in a world where magic is real and any number of people could be listening in or even just like saying it out loud could somehow like I don't know, put you in danger. I don't even necessarily know why that would be more dangerous than if I don't know, even if people still didn't know, it just feels like him evoking where his weakness is and like letting that be spoken aloud doesn't feel correct.
That is a very big concern, but I think there's a much bigger concern that goes around with this, and that is be that Annabeth once again was withholding information from Percy that seemed, I don't know, kind of important, that Luke visited her in San Francisco.
Right. Yes, I forgot about that. So it's kind of like I guess that puts into perspective a lot of the stuff that Percy encounters at Olympus when he encounters Hermes and they have like a weird like
Passive aggressive
a passive aggressive conversation about Annabeth and how she should have protected him and whatever else or protected Luke just to clarify. Yeah, I don't know. That was strange to me cuz that still does not really give a lot of context because I wouldn't be like, oh, well, I guess she could have saved him then. Like, he was kind of far gone in a lot of ways, and then she had no way of knowing that he was telling the truth or that she should trust him.
Well, here's the thing, though. It's like she already knew that he was evil, because remember, I mean, I don't think she got past the whole I'm going to imprison you on holding the universe as a big goof the first time I needed your help.
Exactly. I mean, she's already been tricked before. Like, at first, like, you know, it's like fool me once, shame on you kind of thing, where she gave him the benefit of the doubt a little bit and was like, oh, I'm going to help you basically lift up the sky because she was tricked and, you know, was thinking of the old version of Luke where they were close and he could, you know, be her friend and she trusted him and all of that stuff. All that positive goodwill between them was invoked in that moment and she trusted him and once again was betrayed. So it's like chance after chance this guy has gotten. I can't it's kind of really messed up to expect her to trust him again. And it's something about Hermes specifically, like making a big deal about it. It just feels like kind of icky and like, I don't even know if like misogynist is the right word, but just like the way that it's just like, well, you're the woman who should have saved him because you love him. And it's like, all right, well, like gross guys who make bad decisions and do horrible things, like they're not supposed to like it's not the job of whatever woman they love to like swoop in and like convince them not to be evil anymore. Do you know what I mean? It just like it feels like a kind of crappy thing to put on a child, especially like, oh, you should have had the willpower to like trust him even though that he's betrayed you a bunch of times and like turned him good again. It's like a lot of people have tried to turn him good and talk him out of this like really messed up ideology and it hasn't happened. So like let Annabeth live her life, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of when it comes to this, like if we like stop to really think about it, I think when it comes to the idea of like Luke asking for help, it's kind of weird because the way you look at it is that here's the problem and here's the rub is that, you know, Luke's obviously coming here like he's like getting second thoughts like, oh man, a Titan god's gonna possess my body? Maybe that might be a bad idea. And he comes to the one person that would most likely help her. And the problem, though, Luke tries to get the one person that can actually help him, and she kind of rejects him because he's kind of a jerk. And again, you know, redemption arcs can happen, but the problem, though, is he's already done so much ill will against Annabeth. Like, he's tried to kill her multiple times, and it doesn't quite work. And the problem, though, is, like, when it comes down to the whole solution, it's hard to think about and really wrap your head around because, look, I could play devil's advocate all day long, but, like, Annabeth is her own person when it comes to that stuff. And also, once again, Luke has tried to kill her multiple times. It's like, after a while, it's like, no way, Jose, I cannot do this ever again. I'm sorry.
I don't know. There's just like something that seems so like wormy and selfish where he's just like, oh, I want to run away now that I'm scared. And it's like, this doesn't seem so much like a conscientious moral objection to like, oh, well, Kronos has gone too far. It's like Kronos has gone too far for a while now, and you've just gone along with it because of your own like weird selfish agenda against the gods. And then now that you're like scared that you have to like be the host of his spooky body and you have to do all this like terrifying stuff, jumping into the river Styx and whatever else, then he's like, oh, Annabeth, I'm scared, let's run away. Like, that feels less like a change of heart and more like him being a selfish baby. Do you know what I mean?
Well, here's the thing, though. If he was going to do something like he was really getting second thoughts about a creepy man inhabiting his body, this is where probably in the story he would have probably have defected or at least given the information and the plans for the Battle of New York or whatever is going to happen. Like, that seems like that he'd start spilling the beans about what would be happening.
Right. He does seem to know strategically what's happening, and that's sort of helpful now because Annabeth knows like, oh right, there's something going on with like Luke isn't his final form, and there's probably he's going to try to evolve, I guess is the word they use, to be
is he a
even
Pokemon?
stronger.
He's gonna eat some rare candies?
Basically he's gonna like evolve like a Pokemon. I think that's implying definitely that he wants to maybe like possess Percy in some way or another, because he even said earlier in the book something like, oh, I should have chosen you, oh, you went into the river Styx like Luke but you handled it better. Like, it was kind of like chiding Luke for not being as brave or strong or capable as Percy, you know.
And here's the thing, though, is that even if like Luke came back and he was like, I gotta go to camp, I gotta tell you the plans, like if he just told Annabeth simply, hey, Kronos is going to take my body and they're going to have this invasion, she might have believed them more. But the problem, though, is that, we have the issue with Rick Riordan a lot is like withholding of information, which, could benefit the story, could not. But the rub is that even if he went back to camp and told him the plan, he probably still would have been tried and most likely executed as a war criminal. So who knows?
Yeah, who knows what Chiron would have done. But it's sort of like, his plan comes from a place of selfishness, if that makes sense. It comes from like a place of like him getting like not quite scot-free, but just sort of like being, I don't know, giving amnesty for everything that he's done because he's giving like the littlest bit of information about what Kronos is doing.
But he's not even giving any information,
right,
though.
it's like so
we
vague,
find this out
right?
later on.
And then also he wants to run away, which feels very like cowardly to do. It's not like he wants to like face up to what he's done and go back to the camp.
Hey, Annabeth, maybe we should run away to Argentina. I hear that's a great place this time of year.
Right, it totally is. It's almost exactly like that in some ways, where, yeah, he's like a war criminal, and he's like, well, I'm tired of being a war criminal, and I don't want consequences, and things are getting scary beyond my own little, like, whiny, sort of cringy needs.
So let's go to Argentina.
Yeah,
It'll be
exactly.
A lot of fun.
It 100% does not strike me as a change of heart in any way, so I can't blame Annabeth. And then it's funny because Annabeth is also like, oh, well, I also could have killed him, and I'm like, okay, but that's like a lot to put on you in that moment to like, you're being emotionally manipulated and expected to like make this big decision, and then you're supposed to turn around and like kill the guy. Like, that's a lot happening. I'm sure Kronos would have found another host. Luke is just sort of a distraction in all this. Kronos is the real problem, and he was manipulating Luke to get what he wants. But that, as we've established, there's tons of demigods who have similar motivations who probably could have just have as easily been corrupted. You know what I mean?
And here's the other main concern. How do we know that this wasn't a trick anyways? Like, it's easier to get to Annabeth than it is to get to Percy.
Exactly. It's like, even if you can take it at face value, but even if you take it at face value, it's coming from like a weird place. But it could have been a trap or whatever else. I know that Hermes like made a big deal about it with Annabeth and like has a grudge against her now because it's like, I don't know.
Here's the thing though, she's stuck between a rock and a hard place, and she decided to not even make the choice. Which is something that I guess happened a lot more with like Janice when we were in the Battle of Labyrinth, when he was talking about how she has to make a choice.
Right, yes. We reference that again in this chapter. So I guess it's talking about that choice. They do say that it might be that. Janice had warned Annabeth she would have to make a major choice, and that what had happened after... and that had happened after she saw Luke. Pan had also said something to her. You will play a great role, though it may not be the role you imagined. I wanted to ask her about the vision Hestia had shown me, about her early days with Luke and Talia. I knew it had something to do with my prophecy, but I didn't understand what.
Yeah, see, and here's the thing again, you have prophecies and you have like the things of like you have to let like the future run its course until you get to that main decision because even in this chapter, prophecies are bad. And here's the thing though, it's like even with like Luke, we'll probably move off this a little bit, is that even with Luke, like if they were to run, where would they go?
Yeah, all of America seems to be under attack. And it like demigods have a scent. Like there's they even describe when they did run away, right? When like that's the whole context of how Luke and Talia and Annabeth were like this golden trio of
That's how
people
Thalia died the
roving.
first time.
Yeah,
It's
that's how
because of
Talia
this.
died the first time. First of all, second of all, like they were always being pursued by monsters like all the time, and it
But
seems
now you
like
have a
there's
Titan
even
god coming after you. Like I don't think the chances are the
as
big.
if like Kronos wouldn't be like, "Oh, there you are, Luke." Do you know what I mean? What is he gonna do? Hide behind a rock? Like he's gonna find you. It's just like a very silly plan.
I don't know. Luke and Annabeth just wear like novelty trench coats with like big mustaches their entire lives.
Yeah, exactly. Like one of those like Groucho Marx like glasses, mustaches
Yeah.
situation. Like no, they're not gonna fool
Luke?
anybody.
I'm not Luke. I'm Lucas. There you go. See, the more you think about it, like I understand, like for like a reader, like oh, this seems like again tragedy. It's like Romeo and Juliet. They're going to run away, but then in the end, tragedy, tragedy, tragedy ensues. But even then, it doesn't. It doesn't quite work. No matter which way you think about it, I think Annabeth might have made the right choice. Unfortunately, it might not be the best choice, but it might have been for her the right choice, which is good for her.
Yeah, no, Annabeth did the right choice. I don't think that she should feel any sort of guilt about it or like weird pressure from Hermes. I don't know, something about Hermes like having a dog in this fight when he's been a horrible dad for so long, and that's part of why Luke is so terrible. Not to place all the blame. I mean, Luke just kind of ended up being a jerk regardless, but like for him to swoop in and be like, "Well, I didn't parent my son very well, and now he's like a horrible like I don't know, ancient Greek
Now you can
fascist."
destroy Western civilization as we know it.
Yeah, he
Oh
basically
man,
just
this
wants
is
to
bad.
destroy the world, but it's your job to save him? Like, what? No, how about it's your job to save him, Hermes? You're his dad, and you're a god. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. I get, as much as we, like, talk crap about Annabeth and, like, get a little bit frustrated, I do think she's a very capable, strong character, and she makes good decisions sometimes.
I think it's demonstrated in this chapter. Like she's like tempted literally by the devil. Her first like I guess flame, and she says no, and like she kind of thinks about it rationally.
Exactly. That's like maybe one of her biggest flaws sometimes is that she has this weird affinity for Luke and she's made excuses for him in the past. There's been like a lot of like weird stuff with Luke where even I was like, "Oh, she's going to like trust him again or something weird is going to happen." Or I was even thinking she might be the spy or something at some point because she has these weird complicated allegiances. But from what she describes here, that's like a good amount of character growth, or at least like she took a step back and went, "Okay, he's done this boy who cried wolf thing before. He's hurt me in these ways. He's done like this sort of like irreparable harm to
He's
my
done evil
community."
things that
Yeah,
I
like you
can't
can't just be
wrap
like,
my head
"Oh, well,
around.
I forgive you because I like imagine you as this person you used to be and I forget all this evil, violent stuff you've done." Like she's not that way, which is kind of nice to see because that's kind of part of why I was frustrated with her in the past. The way that she was talking about Luke seemed to like erase a lot of how he was acting currently.
Yes, and I think moving on a little bit because I think Annabeth is a very strong and capable character, and we see her here again. She's at her most vulnerable, like she's quintessentially on her deathbed.
Yeah, no, this is a great scene because it like totally gives her a moment to be like, "I like stood my ground," but then she regrets it, which is so sad because I actually think that that was like a very brave kind of moment for her.
That's more of a trauma thing because when you have like things like domestic abuse, you always think you're always in the wrong.
Yeah, there was like a that sort of dynamic with her and Luke where she's like, "Oh, well, maybe he was right about whatever and I should have helped it." Like that sort of like guilt that she has, I kind of understand psychologically, but I think she should be very proud of this decision in a lot of ways because she has made sort of questionable decisions where she's like thought with her heart and not her head and been like, "Oh, I love Luke and he's was my friend and he was different before," and that's
But he's dead to me now because
exactly
he's
she's
not
made
in
that
there.
pragmatic decision and gone like, it doesn't matter, I can't trust him or I can't take the risk, and I thought that was really cool. I obviously she feels some weird regret about it, but then again, she also feels like she's dying, and there's this weird, like, stirring of emotions that's happening.
Well, there's that part too where she's being really lovey-dovey to Percy, and Percy doesn't know how to like
Yeah, I
handle
think
it.
she's just like, it's a little bit like those videos where people are like on like anesthesia and they're like, "Oh, I love you," whatever, and it's a bit like that with Percy where she's like, "Oh, you look handsome there," and he's kind of is taken aback, like, "All right, what are you on?"
My favorite one is that this guy, his girlfriend, picked him up, and he's like, "You're so beautiful, but I don't want to talk to you because I have a beautiful girlfriend."
Oh my
It's
god.
her.
Oh yeah, yeah, I've seen that. That's kind of a little bit of like the energy that they were bringing with Annabeth. I mean, what she so far she doesn't have any people medicine though. They just have like poured nectar onto her
Well, she
wounds.
also has horrible blood loss, so that could be a contributing factor too.
That's true. She's fading fast in a lot of ways. Maybe she's concussed or something too. So like she isn't maybe fully present. She's feeling in like this weird vulnerable state where she's like, probably not going to die, but it's bringing out a lot of emotions where normally she's kind of a bit more buttoned up and doesn't tell Percy like all this stuff. I wish she did. I wish she didn't have to like get stabbed to like feel vulnerable enough to like tell Percy how she's feeling, but that's a whole other story.
Well, a lot like George Lucas says, it's poetry. It rhymes because we start the first book with Percy Jackson horribly injured and Annabeth taking care of him, and now it's the exact opposite. Percy Jackson's taking care of Annabeth, who's horribly injured at the end of the book series.
That's true, a reflection of that. And similarly, Percy has like that weird babbling moment where he's like, "Who's that pretty girl from the dream?" or whatever, like sort of has that moment of
It has that
before
moment,
he
yeah.
has like any sort of ego or awareness of what's happening. He's like, "Oh, it's Annabeth," and that similarly, she's like, "Oh, you're handsome," or whatever. Before she has like the filter of like, I don't know, teenage anxiety to stop her from saying that.
And it's funny because the chapter previous to both of those is him fighting the Minotaur.
That's true. That's true. There's definitely a lot of
Oh
parallels
man, I'm
happening.
finding like dumb things I just found. This is some observation right there. But so what ends up happening is Percy Jackson kind of lets Annabeth rest. He tries to get Selena because she's kind of like Clarice, because Clarice is the only one that would listen to Selena within reason, because they have like a special friendship.
Yeah, I think that might work. I know that it seems far-fetched and that like the whole framing of that is more like, let's just get rid of Selena because she's kind of a liability and
Well,
whatever,
it makes sense because like she's already like lost her boyfriend, and she's watching all of her friends die.
Right. She's not exactly fit to fight, and she even kind of blames herself for how poorly they're doing. 'Cause she's like, "Oh, I should have been a better fighter," and they're like, "No, you have other talents. You're good at communicating with people," which is exactly where the idea for her going to see Clarice comes up. And then she even thinks like, "Oh, I have an idea. I'll go do that," and it gives her like the sense of purpose where she's felt sort of like useless in this battle. I think that the way that they're framing it is kind of a misdirection. I think Clarice will probably eventually relent and help them at this point because now she has her like carriage or whatever that they were fighting about. So there's like not even what was it, the chariot?
Yeah. So what's pretty much going to happen is at the 11th hour, Clarice is going to show up, and they're going to play some Twisted Sister, and they're going to kick some butt.
It's very obvious that she's gonna come back. Like she's a main character. There's a lot of like lead up to her being this way. Even in the very first book, she like is a bit standoffish. She becomes more of a friend to Percy. There's no way if she's not actively working against them, if she's not literally the spy working for Kronos, she's gonna show up and like look past her kind of ego. You know what I mean? Like eventually she's gonna do the right thing. It's just gonna take her a little bit of time.
And here's the thing, though: it's like we don't even know who the spy is at this point. And even when they meet Thalia, like that's their big concern is like we shouldn't be talking about what we're doing because they knew that you were going to be on the Williamsburg Bridge.
Right, because they always seem like they're one step ahead, like the way that they directed their forces. I think which demigod points out that that's happening, where it's like very clearly people had sort of a
I believe it was
prior awareness.
Thalia.
Was it Thalia or no? There was who was that that child of Apollo who also pointed that out.
There's the Stoll brothers, and then Michael Yu's dead from apparently that's what's happened.
Or at least he's missing. But yeah, was it Will Solace too?
Yeah, there's also Will Solace.
They all were like, wait a second, our forces have been especially weakened because they always seem to know where we are, like one step ahead of us, and that obviously is coming from some sort of weird reconnaissance situation. I thought that Percy's approach to this was kind of buck wild, where he was like, well, we're all going to tear each other apart from suspicion, so let's, like, ignore it. But, like, strategically, that's such a bad idea, because they definitely will keep losing if someone is, like, leaking the information of what they're doing before they get a chance to do it.
B, here's the thing, though. Does that sound like something that's just totally insane, like you should tell everyone that the spy? Do you think that's just a very, like, just a common occurrence? Would that be your plan if you knew there was a spy?
At the very least, I would expect Percy to maybe say that to everybody, but still be trying to figure it out, like to sort of misdirect them. But I don't think it's a good plan overall.
B, here's the thing, though, is like the second you decide to call out that there's a spy in their midst, that spy knows that you're on to him.
Well, no, but the spy already knows. He's definitely mentioned it already to everybody. He's been like, oh, there's a spy.
Here's the thing, though, B, is that if they mention that and they start to do things like, oh, we're going to start frisking everybody, like, you'll find out who the spy is very quickly.
Looking for the scythe, right? Because that's like an important, like, whatever, the communication tool between Kronos and the spy.
Even throughout history, like, when we're talking about war, you're dealing with it in, like, many different ways. In World War II, like, I was looking at this, it was actually interesting. Like, when it came to, like, GIs writing letters, they would write the letters, they'd send it to, like, an outpost, and people would, like, look at it, and they would scribble out things like addresses or, like, important pieces of information,
Right.
and then they would take a photo of that and send the photo, not the original letter, just in case someone wasn't, like, having, like, an encrypted message in the document.
Like, in the actual physical document. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, there's crazy things that occur, especially during the Civil War. Like, people weren't getting their mail. That was something that I was doing research on, was like, Postmaster General was like keeping people's mail because they didn't know who was who, because this ends up as a civil war, brother against brother. And that's something that's very similar here.
Do you think it's, like, strategically advantageous for him to just be like, well, we're going to go
Yes.
full Monsters Are Due on Maple Street if I mention it, so let's just, like, not even think about who the spy is?
Now, B, here's the rub. If Percy Jackson were to mention it, everyone would become paranoid. This would be like Jack Torrance in The Shining.
Right, I understand that. He's kind of already mentioned it, so I think that cat's somewhat out of the bag.
Well, here's the thing, though, B, is like, they know that there's a spy, but they don't know that they're giving away their position, like they're still actively spying. So the second you do that, everyone's going to become super paranoid, and this is where, like, you're going to have, like, a breakdown of communication. Not only that, but you're going to have a breakdown of structure.
Yeah, they're going to just tear each other apart. I do understand that. I definitely would hope that Percy is maybe just saying that to sort of misdirect people, but really he's still sort of keeping an eye out for the spy, because, like, truly they're never going to win if someone is always telling, like, the enemy where they're going and what their plans are. You know what I mean?
This is just my theory, B, but if Percy Jackson really wanted to root out the spy, there's this thing called a pen and paper. He writes down some notes. He gives all of his commanders a different place they need to attack.
And then whoever goes where, it rules out who the spy is. Exactly. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right?
And then you give them all, like, weird places, and then you say over the phone, hey guys, we're going to be meeting at the Brooklyn Bridge, and all of a sudden all the forces go to the Brooklyn Bridge. Everyone that didn't go to that place you gave them a pen and paper for, they would know. Like, there's logic things that you can do.
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. There are ways that he could figure this out. It does feel a little bit like Percy just doesn't want to think about it. I don't think it's anybody very close to him.
Well, I think it's different type of thinking. It's like logic thinking rather than thinking with, like, your gut.
Right. This is more kind of like Percy as, like, a leader, I guess, where he's more concerned about morale than he is about strategy.
Well, yeah, that's more of an Annabeth department, but the problem, though, with Annabeth right now is she's kind of hurt.
Exactly, yeah. Like, she would maybe think of a better solution to the situation, but she's, like, missing in action, like lying on a chaise lounge trying not to die, so, like, she can't exactly be telling them what to do. And Percy's like, I don't know, well, I guess let's just not think about it, because I don't really want to deal with, like, people doing the finger pointing thing, which I could easily see it could devolve pretty quickly. I mean, grown people would act pretty ridiculous in a situation like that. Never mind, like, teenagers, like, accusing each other of being distrustworthy. Like, it would be a really kind of a nightmare. So I do understand the motivation.
Well, no, it would become like Lord of the Flies. Like, there would be total anarchy.
No, exactly.
Especially,
yeah.
like, in the city, which, I was thinking about today. I was taking a shower. It's like, wait, so all the people that went to sleep, Like, what if they were like cooking food or there was something happening, and they kind of talk about that.
Yeah, they're just like how many people had stoves on. So there's something really funny and mundane about that, right? Like there's all these actual mythical monsters threatening the world as we know it, but what's really going to burn New York down is the fact that a bunch of people were in the
Little
middle
Timmy
of
trying to cook
making
some
like
SpaghettiOs.
toast, you know? Yeah, exactly. Like they left the oven on and now everything's going to set on fire. Like that's pretty wild to me, honestly.
The funny thing is, I was like thinking of like, oh no, there's so many bad things that can happen, especially in like this global situation of New York with 50 million people.
Right, exactly. With like so many buildings close together and like everything sort of interconnected.
And everything's highly flammable.
Yeah, well, not everything, but a lot of things. A lot of old buildings are definitely highly flammable.
Yeah, well, I don't think all the houses are made out of asbestos, so I don't know about that one, B. Most of them are in New York, but not all of them.
I'm sure a lot of skyscrapers are more, strategically made with materials that don't burn everything, especially in Manhattan. Maybe some of the older buildings aren't quite as safe.
Yeah, so Percy Jackson kind of like is worried. He actually gets to meet up with Grover again. Of course, Grover tells him some really bad news.
Some horrible news. Well, all we hear is bad news. We hear bad news from Grover and from Talia, where they're just like, yeah, we're dying out there, is kind of the gist of it. We could get into specifics, but kind of...
Because it's like, we love that Grover's back, but of course, he's the bearer of bad news. Like, a bunch of nymphs are dead. They've killed some giants. Thalia has lost a couple hunters.
They kill a bunch of satyrs, right? He says that like half of the satyrs are killed.
Yeah, half the satyrs are nymphs and satyrs and everything in between.
Yeah, it's like a kind of a real mess. That's especially sad. I think it definitely is like framed specifically to like upset people because it's like Grover, who's kind of more the comic relief usually, and he shows up and he's like in battle armor and he looks very distraught and he's describing like half of his culture being destroyed, which is like, I think that's kind of the way he phrased it, like half of my people are just like straight up murdered. Like it's pretty horrible.
It's like genocide is happening right now. This war is going to make and break the whole world. And even Thalia is like losing hunters, and of course the only way that they can die is in battle.
Yeah, it's kind of just a mess. I don't really know if anything is looking positive at this point, other than the fact that Annabeth probably won't die. Everything else is like the most pessimistic possible.
Well, it'd be funny. It's like Percy Jackson's like, well, it could be worse. It could be raining. And then there's like thunder, crackle, crackle.
And you're like, seriously, Zeus?
Not only do we get that bad news, B, but we also find out that Typhon's coming his way downtown. He's just about to hit, the Appalachian Mountains. So we're gonna lose some stories and maybe the Mothman, but we'll get there.
Yeah, it's strategically speaking, they kind of don't really have a lot to do. They're
slowly
bad.
being boxed in. They have 2 days, and now Percy Jackson's only thing that he can do right now is get some sleep because he's exhausted and he's their best fighter.
Maybe I'm about as dumb as Percy in that I feel like every time Percy is ready to go to sleep, he's like, finally some rest. I'm like, oh, finally some rest for Percy. And then he has like several visceral dreams about horrible things happening to his loved ones. And you're like, oh, right. He never sleeps. He never is able to rest.
Here's the thing, though, B. Is the joke going to be at the ending of this book is going to be Percy Jackson went to sleep and didn't have any bad dreams ever again?
I really hope so, because it's ridiculous, actually, because it's like a heavy plot point that he often has like these visions in his dreams, and it's pretty well established that they're like real things. They're not often just visions. They're like visions of real things that have happened in the past. They're not like fictional things that he's looking at.
Yeah, and it's funny because when Percy Jackson goes to sleep now, his dreams are a lot worse than you could possibly imagine, because his first dream that he has is of Nico, and then Nico's trying to resurrect, or at least speak to his mom.
Oh, God. This is like kind of meta in a way, or like it's complicated. It gets very like Inception, because it's sort of a dream within a dream, because he's having a vision of Nico, and then Nico is having like these visions of his past and finding out what's happening with him. And it's like, okay, so he's like seeing Nico's vision somehow. It's very complicated. He's like weirdly astral traveling to the underworld.
Like, looking at this, it's kind of like, I can see why later on, like after this book series, that Rick Riordan would later go on to do different perspectives. Like his next book series, not going to spoil anything, but it follows multiple viewpoint characters, because this almost gets a little ridiculous now. Like, I can understand now why Rick Riordan was like, I gotta start having more characters than just one.
Right, yeah, because doing a dream of a vision at a certain point, you're like, okay, like, it's very hard to convey plot that way. Or, like, I mean, I guess it works for this story because you're like, all right, they're demigods, whatever. I'll kind of write anything off as possible. But I see what you're saying. It's kind of like narratively, he feels the impulse to be like, oh, well, what's going on with Nico? And he has to do it with a dream because there's no perspective chapter of Nico. So either he has to have a vision or someone else has to tell Percy what's happening, or there needs to be like some sort of like a dream or vision or something. It can't just be like straight up like, oh, here's what's happening with Nico. Like that doesn't function in the story the same. Or yeah, or the other option of course would be that Percy would have to be there while it's happening for to like perceive it.
Yeah, that's the other one. That's the last one that has to happen, though. I can understand and respect why Rick Riordan switches it to that other method of just having multiple viewpoint characters, especially because you get different thoughts and feelings. Like, I won't talk about it now. If we ever get to the other books, that's something that I actually really do enjoy, books with multiple viewpoint characters.
I do think there's a benefit from this type of perspective because it comes with like this almost diary like perspective of him being like, okay, here's what happened to me and me only, and it's narrowing in and it adds sort of dramatic tension when Percy doesn't know about something else that's going on. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit different to have the type of dramatic tension where you're having different characters have different experiences and they know different types of information, but you can't tell the other character what you already know. So like it's both are interesting just in different ways.
So there's different things when it comes to multiple viewpoint characters versus one viewpoint character. You're going to get different things, especially with tension. Like a good example, I'm not going to spoil the book, but there's a book series by Brandon Sanderson called Stormlight Archives. And one of the book endings is pretty much, it's 200 pages, but it's like a big battle sequence. And you're getting different perspectives, but it's people doing things. And the perspective switches so quickly that like it's almost like exhilarating. Like, oh my God, this is going to happen. Oh no, keep going, keep going, keep going. Oh man.
Right. You want to like stay with that perspective. It's sort of like when you're watching a TV show and you're like, oh, what's happening next in the scene? And then they switch to like someone else in the ensemble cast. In this case, it's like, I guess the function of these books too has a lot to do with how little Percy knows. And they're kind of like replicating how Percy feels with the reader. You know what I mean? Because you're given about as much perspective as he is given. So it's like, oh, all right, I'm learning with you. I'm starting Camp Half-Blood with you. I'm finding out what these people believe, what is the structure of demigod society. You know what I mean? You're like going on this journey together. And so like having that perspective kind of puts you in the place of Percy and you're like, oh, right, okay, I know only as much information as he does, which is kind of interesting.
And here you have a different type of perspective because we open this up and Nico's trying to summon his mom and he summons her, but the first person that comes before her is Bianca because they look very similar. And she's like, please don't do this. Like, we've talked about this before. You know, your fatal flaws, you hold grudges and you're holding a grudge against your dad. But if you like keep going through this, you open the door and you enter this room, you're going to be changed.
Right. You're going to regret having this much information, which I mean, I can't like blame Nico. I also, even after we find out eventually like what he learns, I still wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, he should have never known that. Cause like, you know, it's that ignorance is bliss kind of perspective where it's like, is it better to know?
Well, so here's the thing though. It's like sometimes knowledge that you acquire, is it good knowledge or is it going to hinder you? And this seems like something that's like, yes, it's bad, but also it's something that he should know because it could be used against him, but he got it in the right perspective.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like knowing about this curse, which we're going to get into, I feel like that's important to understand and might impact him later on. And hiding information from him just because it will hurt him isn't necessarily the most healthy thing to do. And I mean, we've established Hades isn't the most healthy parent, so.
You're totally right about that, B. And so how Nico enters the room, like this bad room, is, of course, it's a flashback where it's in the 1940s. You have the Andrews sisters playing on the radio.
Is it the 40s or the 20s?
I thought it's during World War II.
Oh,
So
was it
it's
World
either
War
the
Two? Oh,
30s.
okay. So yeah, then it would be the
Oh
30s.
no, it would probably be 1932 or 1933. So like I said before, the Andrews sisters are playing on the radio.
I guess for some reason the pinstripe suit made me think that it was the 20s.
Well, here's the thing though, it's like they talk about it and they talk about what year it is. And I think they talk about how Roosevelt's president in Titan's Curse, if I remember correctly.
All right. So yeah, then right, they do mention that. So then it would have been later
And
than
there's
the
also
20s.
World War II's happening, so at
Right. Yeah,
least
no, you're
it's
right.
1932.
So it's a little bit later than that.
Yes, and it's interesting that you have the situation. You know what I was reminded of? This is where it would either become like a black and white movie, or it's like the aesthetic becomes Series of Unfortunate Events.
Yeah, definitely. Where they're whisked away to different places to go live.
No, exactly, and it's
Only
interesting
a
because you see
Fury
Hades
is
in.
Mr. Poe, which is somehow better than Mr. Poe, which is kind of sad.
Well, isn't like a jar of mustard's better than Mr. Poe? But I guess Mrs. Dodds is better.
Oh my god, now I'm imagining opening a jar of mustard and a Fury's inside.
Wow, we're playing 1930s Pokemon today. But it's interesting because we have Hades, who's just tragedy, tragedy, tragedies. He's warning Maria D'Angelo, come stay with me in the underworld, and she's like, no, because there's spooky dead people there, and there's no way to raise children. And I'm gonna take the kids, and we're gonna start running, and bad things
by
are
the
gonna
way,
happen.
side note, it is the 40s probably because it said she looked like a star from an old 40s movie. So they're indicating it's actually pretty late.
So it would probably be before 1945, probably 1942.
Yeah, before the end of World War II. So around that time.
Yeah, because they're talking about how they have because they had the big three met up,
Right,
and
that's
they
a
had the
very
great
important
prophecy at the end.
detail about the World War and how that has a lot to do with like the weird truce that Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon make about not having kids anymore.
Now, here's the question, though. If we're going to talk about this, if we're going by this, there's the big three. Obviously, it would probably be Roosevelt, Stalin, and Hitler. Which is which for the parentage? Because this sounds like something that Rick Riordan would have fun with doing.
Yeah, once you like get into that kind of stuff, it's really complicated. You could be like, oh, well, all of them would be son of Hades, obviously, because but then like you're like, oh, well, maybe some of them would be son of Ares because of war. Do you know what I mean?
No, but it's specifically the big three. So here's the thing, though. So would like FDR be a Poseidon? Like, would he be like surfing on the waves in his wheelchair?
No,
That's
that
awesome.
doesn't sound quite right. Yeah. I don't know. I guess Hitler liked boats. Was he son of Poseidon? Like, this is a lot of weird theories.
Well, but if you get into it, he was also a painter, so wouldn't he be like a son of Apollo?
Again, not a big three, though.
But once again, this is like Rick Riordan's mindset, like, well, anyone could be a demigod.
This is starting to feel like the Wonder Woman movie a little bit, where it's like, oh, these horrible war criminals were actually being influenced by an evil god. Do you know what I mean?
By Ares. Yeah, by Ares, the god of war.
Yeah, it's like the same.
But like,
kind of
again, that's
idea.
something that you can think about. And it's like such a, like, maybe it's something we shouldn't think about, but it's like, it's just funny that you think of like these people and then you try to equate them to the big three, and then you go from there, and this is like how World War II started because of the Greek gods and how they're real, and all their kids have issues.
We did just talk about the thing that Rick Riordan does where he makes different historical figures demigods, and I do think that sometimes it strikes me as maybe not tactless, but like not the most delicate way to like discuss history, where you're like, oh, well, the reason that these dynamics played out in like international relations is because of demigods, and it's like, oh, that famous person, that was a demigod, and like this political figure, that was a demigod, and that was a god too. Like, you know what I mean? It just feels a little bit kind of silly.
Well, it's a little silly, but I enjoy it because obviously it's a joke. It's like, did you know Abraham Lincoln was a son of
Yeah, exactly. I just
Ares?
think that like that kind of stuff is very funny, and sometimes it can veer into like a little tasteless, where, like you said, like being like, oh yeah, I think Hitler was this, and it's like, I don't want you to tell me what demigod he was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but see, it's like, that's the joke, though, isn't it? It's like because they allude to it in this book. They allude to it in this chapter. It's like, which is which? And it's, again, it's almost comedic, but once you get into like the nitty gritty of it, it's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be thinking about this. B, you know in your heart of hearts, someone has sorted these people.
Oh, I'm sure. It's kind of funny because it makes me think about like other types of fictional stories that start off not delving into something that intense, and then they kind of inherently end up, I don't know, implying a lot of weird things about like history, like the the Despicable Me logic of like, oh, the minions always go with like who's the most evil, but then like there's like a weird chunk of time where they like retcon the minions not being around during World War II, because then that way they would have to be around Nazis, and it would have been like a weird moral quandary for that movie to deal with. And it's similar to this where it's just like, oh, well, okay, is the war in Europe being influenced by the gods, or are the gods like, it's just sometimes a little bit like weird to take something that's like a little bit more like silly and doesn't have real life stakes or like implications, and then like mapping it onto like actual world events. And I know that's kind of the whole point of this series, is to like teach people history, but it's a very careful line to walk, because you can really end up like minimizing like the real causes of that, and like implying some kind of like weird stuff about like why wars happen. Do you know what I mean?
Well, see, and the thing would be, the joke would be Ares did it. That would be the whole joke the entire time.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like, that's like just such a very strange, funny way to like frame actual wars that have happened, you know?
Yeah, no, it's really funny when you think about it, but then again, you have to think about like the implications, and then we won't get into it because we'll just make everyone super depressed.
Yeah. Anyway, this is kind of fascinating.
But like, it's interesting because we talk about this a lot in this chapter about like pretty much is, oh no, is this book an allegory for World War II? Oh no, this is bad. This is terrible.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that he's trying to be like obvious with that? Like he's expecting people to pick up on that kind of allegorical representation?
Well, if this was going to be any type of allegory, it would be on the Civil War, because like Rick Riordan loves the Civil War.
It would definitely be more Civil War. You're right. He loves the Civil War, and that's exactly what's happening with the, like you said, the brother versus brother thing. Even like I was talking about earlier, the descriptions of them like doing sort of battle triage with whatever they had around, that's like very reminiscent of the Civil War. So yeah, I do think it's kind of more of a metaphor for that.
And I'm not speaking out of my butt, but there is a character possibly in another book that's very Civil War related.
Okay.
And he like gets into super detail about it, but that's what I won't say about that.
All right, I won't ask too much.
But moving on a little bit, Maria's like, I'm going to take the kids and we're going to run. And she's like, let me just grab my things real quick. And it's almost like, I want to say it's not comedy. This wouldn't be the joke. Is like she grabs like her suitcase and it just blows up.
Yeah, is she just like killed by lightning, basically? Is that what's implied?
Well, she's killed by the Master Bolt or like old timey C4.
Yeah, whatever. It's Zeus killing her for like weird motivational reasons.
It wasn't meant for her, it was meant for the children, which is even creepier.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, it is kind of Harry Potter, isn't it? Where it's like he missed the children and got the parent.
Well, no, it's a lot like you have the ticking bomb and the person grabs the wrong package and carries it out of the building.
Right, but you know what
explodes.
I'm saying? It's like a similar, like,
yes.
Oh, like here's like a powerful children who need to be destroyed for some prophecy reasons, and then the children aren't actually killed, and then the parent is like in the crossfire killed. It's like a similar thing. Yeah, and then
Isn't
in
that
some
just
ways,
the story of Moses?
like, I mean, I hate to like make too many comparisons to Harry Potter, because again, I'm like not an expert, and I hope like I'm making a fair point when I say like them being sort of sent away. You made the unfortunate events comparison, but there is sort of like a Dursley's comparison you can make of being like, oh, we're putting you like somewhere else outside of all this magic stuff because we don't even want you to like reach the age where you could fulfill this kind of messed up prophecy. So we're just gonna like put you on the back burner and put you in this like weird place where you don't even age. It's like a similar kind of motivation.
So B, what I'll say about this is that that's very true, except like in Harry Potter it's a little different because
they were just waiting for him to get to a certain age, right?
They were waiting for him to be a certain age, but they also didn't want him to grow up. Like, here's Dumbledore's philosophy. If Harry were to grow up and had all these things of like, oh, I'm awesome, I was the chosen one, I had the death curse put onto me and I blocked it, like he's gonna grow up and be like a Macaulay Culkin, or he'd be like Macaulay Culkin. He'd be so famous that it'd be ruined.
Yeah, just like a kid star.
But good job for Macaulay Culkin. I like that he bounced back. I love him.
Right,
He's
yeah,
so cool.
but I know what you're saying. That it is, again, that's like totally messed up. We don't have time to get into why Dumbledore is messed up. We just don't. There's many pages written, I'm sure, about how Dumbledore is a messed up character.
Sometimes good intentions can be bad, and sometimes bad intentions can be good. That's all I'll say about it.
Yeah, but it's kind of like this similar weird thing where it's like this authority figure is like making the strategic decision about children and like who they're going to be in the future, and be like, all right, right, well, we could just have you like live a normal life, but instead I'm like afraid of what's going to happen to you. So I'm going to like sequester you away in this like place where you won't be a person.
Well, here's the funny thing, though, B, is like if we compare this to Harry Potter, it's the exact same thing where Voldemort had gotten a prophecy and he had to kill Harry Potter because it was either between him or Neville Longbottom. And he decided, I'll just do Harry Potter because, this is the one I'm picking. I'm literally flipping a coin here at the situation. I'll get Neville another day.
Eeny, meeny, miny, moe.
Yeah, but here's the interesting thing, though, is, again, we have the thing of, like, the fates playing a role, but we also have prophecy kind of intervening, like, in this way. Like, Bianca and Nico are totally protected, but the only person that dies is Maria, the one person that wanted to, like, kind of make sure they grew up and get past 16. Like, the universe itself needs them to become 16. And again, even like Hades, like this is like a tragedy. Like again, this is Hades' entire life. Is this guy's so sad? Oh man, I feel kind of bad for Hades a little bit because he's trying to do the right things. Like it's like I don't care what Persephone says. My actual life that I'm now dating you, Maria. I love you, but I also love my wife that I am quite married to.
So this is where Hades curses what Zeus has done. I also almost totally forgot about what happens with the Oracle too.
Oh, with the Oracle of Delphi, which we explained why she's a mummy.
Yeah, it said she was no more than 12, so she's like not an old person yet.
She's like she's Percy's age when he started these books.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because they talk about how we have we'll go with the Oracle first before we get to that curse, but with the Oracle of Delphi, like Percy Jackson's dreaming about her and he has like this nagging feeling that he's seen her before, which obviously is the Oracle.
Well, yeah, I mean now she's a mummy this is when she's a live child, so she vaguely looks the same.
It's so horrifying. Like this is a fate worse than death because he doesn't have to kill her. He just has to make her suffer. Again, this is a fate worse than death, and he's going to mummify her and make sure that she doesn't die, which is more horrifying than actually killing her.
She knows what the future is, but it's not like she's causing these things to happen, but he's like acting out in this weird revenge fantasy where it's like, oh, well, technically it's Zeus's fault, but it's like she represents this sort of like unfair twisting and turning of fate, and that, this woman that he loved was killed, so he has to curse her in this way, which is basically that she is gonna die like a mortal sort of, but like have to live forever in like this decaying body.
Yes, because it's horrifying because the process of becoming an oracle is like, oh, once you die, the idea of the oracle gets passed on to another person. And the funny thing, though, is, like, when you look at the Oracle, like, she can't see the future. Like, she has, like, these weird, like, bursts of, like, cognition where she makes a prophecy, and that's it. Like, she's just, like, a vessel for this stuff. Like, it's like, don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, I can see the future. I can't change it. The Hades curse is basically, I swear, as long as my children remain outcasts, as long as I labor under the curse of your great prophecy, the Oracle of Delphi will never have another mortal host. You will never rest in peace. No other will take your place. Your body will wither and die, and still the Oracle spirit will be locked inside you. You will speak your bitter prophecies until you crumble to nothing. The Oracle will die with you.
Jeezy, creasy, pepper cheesy.
Yeah, it's bad. What a horrifying. I don't know why I never thought that the Oracle was like recently a mummy, because it kind of seemed like she was ancient and had been like that forever, and they never really explained her backstory, so it's kind of horrifying to think that she was just like a child in the 40s, which wasn't historically that long ago, and then she somehow became like a crumbling corpse mummy like that they keep in the attic. It's like that's not that long ago. Like literally there are grandparents who were that age. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, then if that would be like if your grandparent was like turned into a mummy. It's pretty messed up.
I don't know. I could ask my grandfather, is he a mummy? Probably not. He'd be like,
probably
no.
Slap you across the face.
No, he probably laughed. You've heard the things I talked to him about.
That's true. You're right.
But here's the thing that I found that was interesting about this too is like, compare this to the first book, like everything that's fun and whimsical, we're finally getting the explanation on why it's not fun and whimsical anymore.
Right, exactly. It used to just be like this fun little detail about camp, and you're like, oh, I guess that's really messed up that she's a mummy, huh?
Yeah, but then you realize it's a curse and like she has a mouth but cannot scream.
Yeah, basically, yeah, she's like cursed forever to have this like
and it's funny
Sisyphean
because
task.
And it's funny because there's the part in Titan's Crest where she gets up and like walks out of the building, meaning that she was technically alive.
She was basically like, I'm tired of this. I'm so tired.
I gotta yeet out of here. Yeah, so we find out that Nico and Bianca, they get their minds wiped and they're gonna be in the Lotus Casino. It's a lot like you want to hear something dumb that I was thinking about? This is like Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith, where C-3PO and R2-D2, they get their minds wiped, so that's why they don't remember anything in A New Hope.
Somewhat like that. Yeah, like it's strategically important that they don't remember who they are, basically.
It's important that they don't remember who they are, because I guess if they remember, bad things will happen, but also, they just watched their mom blow up.
A little too late for that. Yeah.
I guess...
I don't really know why Hades made a big deal about him not seeing this, or that Bianca didn't, because it's like... We don't know the details about the mom dying or any of that stuff, but a lot of it is sort of like implied. You know what I mean? Like they didn't want them to reach 16. That's why they were in the Lotus Hotel. Their mom died for whatever reason, that Hades had a motivation for putting them there, and that, you know what I mean? Like these are just like specifics to a story we kind of already had the broad strokes for.
Yeah, but we're finally getting all the mysteries kind of filled in. So it's something that we just needed to have it happen.
Yeah, I guess the Oracle of Delphi we didn't really know about. That's not even necessarily something that Nico would care about. Like, that's just, like, a detail that we're finding out, like, lore of Percy Jackson, but it's not, like, you know, important to his history necessarily.
Well, now he knows that his mom blew up because of Zeus's hand, so we don't know what's going to happen with that. Like, he now has more motivation, which is bad.
Right, if he's going to have something against Zeus all of a sudden.
He's already a moody teenager, and now he's going to have more of a moody teenager antics.
Yeah, no, it's bad. It's not great. Maybe that's like the main reason I wouldn't want Nico to see that stuff, is because he's just like so prone to weird acting out that seeing that would give him like a new
perspective,
revenge fantasy. Yeah. So that I could see being like, oh god, this little emo kid is gonna try and murder Zeus now. You know what I mean? Like, it's not good. Demigods are so fragile, honestly. Like they just have like these weird hang-ups, and then all of a sudden they become like these revenge obsessed maniacs at like the slightest provocation, and it's kind of ridiculous.
Again, Bianca pretty much says it like black and white in here, and that is, yeah, your fatal flaw is holding a grudge. Oh man, if you want to hold a grudge, this is it. This is like he saw his mom explode
at the hand of a god because of like some weird prophecy that had to do with him.
Yeah, that had to do with him, but I think we're forgetting the bigger picture here is that Hades is a bad guy, but not bad guy. Because he like wiped their memory so they wouldn't have to suffer by seeing their memory of this.
Right. I mean, I do see where he's coming from. He does act sort of petulantly, like he acts out because he's so upset. So he's like, I'm going to curse Delphi even though she doesn't really have anything to do with it. And I'm going to like hide my children away and not explain what's going on with them because it's like, I'm just going to ignore this responsibility and not heed the warning of Delphi that it's going to eventually happen anyway. Like he kind of acts very immature and like not very
he's a god. Who's going to tell him otherwise?
We have to remember the whole point is that the gods in this universe aren't flawless or infallible. They have, you know, human emotions sometimes and act very selfishly or illogically. And so that's the situation here.
And again, that's why I love the gods in the sense of like for Greek mythology. They're so fascinating. They're interesting character studies. Unlike you can have a god, but also they're broken in many different ways, but they have all this power. And it's like they could do whatever they want, but yet they have either tradition or they have their own self to like kind of keep them in self-check. And they do things like this, which happens repeatedly throughout Greek mythology, which is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, this is definitely a good example of all the various, like, interpersonal relationship stuff going on with, like, the gods, you know, especially the big three. It's like Hades acts out, Zeus acts out. They all have, like, not really abided by this decision that they like agreed to. Like none of them actually listened, basically.
Yeah, because they're all hypocrites. So Percy Jackson has another dream. There's like the wavy effect.
Yeah, this is kind of what we're talking about with the dream thing. It's like, oh god, we need exposition about these other characters. Oh crap. All right, well, he also dreams about Rachel too. It's like, oh my god, like if we had other perspectives,
it would help so much, but we've already talked about
we
that.
We wouldn't need like an endless dream. Like this poor man, like you think he would wake up after like one dream, but then it always like does a jump cut to like another horrifying vision. It's like, dude, can't catch a break.
He calls the police, help me, I'm having terrible dreams and they keep following me. Sorry, can't do anything about that.
So this is like confusing. I don't exactly understand what's happening.
So pretty much Rachel Elizabeth Dare is chilling on the beach, and like she has like a weird, like almost, I don't know if she's possessed or anything, but like she starts writing, like she goes from like writing something to writing straight in Greek, and it just says Perseus.
It says she knelt and began writing in the surf with her finger. I tried to make out the letters. I thought my dyslexia was acting up until I realized she was writing ancient Greek.
So whatever's happening to Rachel is pretty bad.
Yeah, it seems like she's translating something, but I don't quite know where she's getting this information. She's writing something in the sea. I don't know why she has to write it in the sea. I don't know why it. All that Percy can make out is that it has his name in it.
That's kind of
so it's
obvious
like,
but it's being written in the sea because Percy Jackson's dad is Poseidon.
because it's Percy. Yeah, exactly. I don't exactly understand the process of what's happening right now. Like why she specifically needs to do this other than like, oh, we're on theme or whatever.
Yeah,
you know
we're
what I
on
mean?
theme, but she has a bad feeling about this, so she kind of like runs to her dad, and she's pretty much like, we need to go back to New York, and he's just like, what? What for?
This is the problem with this kind of like secret identity thing where like someone knows what demigods actually are, and then her family's like just a bunch of mortals who don't actually understand what's happening. And she's like, have you noticed that it's kind of weird how you're not getting phone calls? And they're like, oh yeah, I guess that is weird. Like they're just like so blind to all this stuff. Well, obviously she can see through the mist and understand what's happening. So like all these humans make these like weird flippant excuses about, oh well, I mean, I thought everything was fine. Like they don't, have any kind of reason to think stuff is up because they're like, not invest in demigods, or like they're not contextualizing this weird situation through the lens of like, oh, monsters and myths exist. And obviously she can't explain it, or that would be kind of a betrayal to Percy and also very difficult to explain. So it's like this weird tit for tat thing where she has to like both convince her dad and also not tell the truth.
Well, she's also trying to do like rational things that her dad might believe. Like, isn't it weird that you're not getting any phone calls? And
yeah, no, exactly. And they like don't notice or care, basically. It's like, oh, well, it's the weekend.
yeah, well, it's the weekend. But Dad, you hate the beach. We're just here. It's like, well, we spent a lot of money to come here.
Yeah, first of all, it's like very silly because they're like rich, so it doesn't even matter that if they were to leave. And I don't know. I feel like she should have just come up with a more specific problem instead of this whole deal that she makes. She could have just been like, I just got a call from Percy. Percy is in the hospital. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, she doesn't need to be like, all of New York is in trouble. Like, that seems like a very heavy thing to convince her dad of.
How would you convince your dad that you need to go back to New York when he's on vacation? I don't know, Atlantic City? Where would your dad like to go?
I mean, like, I feel like all parents sometimes are like irrational, especially if like, well, whatever, we spent money. But again, Rachel's parents are super rich, so like the money is kind of like this weird made up excuse for why he doesn't want to leave. And again, she also says they don't like the beach, so it's just like this weird made up status reason why they're there to begin with. But if she just straight up said, hey, Percy's in the hospital, something bad, like she should lie. She shouldn't say that, oh, New York is in danger, there's this big vague thing that I can't explain. Like, why would you bite off all of that to try and like explain to somebody? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Okay, well, here's his response as a rational person. We'll visit him when we get back. We'll be back in a couple of days. You can call him. Have you called him? Is he okay? Is he going to die right now?
I don't know. I feel like Rachel can think on her feet and that she could have come up with like a more...
Well, she did. She pushed the Whopper button. She's like, okay, Dad, like, if we go back to New York, I will go to your stupid prep school or wherever you want me to go.
Right, but that's like... I feel like she could have done this in a way where she didn't have to like make a weird deal with him, because he seems like a jerk, but he doesn't seem like a sociopath. So like if she said Percy is like on life support or something, she could have like literally lied about anything like majorly serious and then gone and seen what was going on. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think that she necessarily had to do this other than the weird narrative tension of like, oh, well, he wants her to go to this finishing school. So like if she used that as a bargaining chip, it just seems kind of like a made up conflict that doesn't quite even make sense why she would even bring that into this situation. You know what I mean?
And I get that, and I respect that. I feel like it's a narrative tension thing, because this is a trope of like the child going to the prep school, and you have to,
Right,
put
no,
the
we were
chip
talking
in
about
this.
this off
Yeah.
mic. That happens a lot, right? Because I was saying that this happened with in Anne with an E, which I'm sure it happens also in Anne of Green Gables original text, but I haven't read that far in
It
that
also happens
series.
a lot
But
in Jumanji.
yeah, or like military school. I feel like that's like usually the male equivalent, but it's like the same kind of idea. You know what I mean? It's like usually boys are sent to military school and girls are sent to finishing school. And that's definitely like its own weird sexist thing of like, men are taught to be soldiers and women are taught to like, I don't know, like drink tea. Like we don't even have time to
You have to
unpack all
balance your
that.
books on your head while men fire
Exactly,
guns.
like that kind of stuff, which, obviously is diametrically opposed to the very uncouth, like wild child that is Rachel, who's like off, dressed as a living statue and doing like weird art, and like that doesn't mesh with who she
Well,
is
you
as a
also have to
person.
remember, like, she does all this artsy fartsy stuff, and I'm sure her dad's like, please stop doing that. You're kind of embarrassing the family name.
Yeah, no, he's like, you're embarrassing me, which, like, I don't even know if that's necessarily a real thing that would happen, because I feel like a lot of rich people would be like, look at my artistic daughter, she's so interesting.
Well,
I don't know.
again, like, here's the joke. It's like, he's too busy paying attention to this money that he doesn't pay attention to his daughter.
Yeah, that's true. I guess he doesn't really care about what happens. It's more of like, again, like a status thing. The same reason why he would want to stay at the vacation. He would want her to go to this finishing school because it's, or whatever, prep school, I think they said. He wanted her to go to this prep school.
It's like the prestigious school that she's
Because
going
it
to.
like
It's like,
represents a certain echelon of people, and then he wants them to turn her into like this high society person. It's actually like very similar to like Gilmore Girls too, like this weird expectation for like young women to like fulfill a role.
what is it? I think, isn't it in Gilmore Girls, like, she goes to, like, the special school?
Well, she goes to Chilton, which is like she actually wants to go to that private school, but then there's also where she does like sort
Isn't
of
there's a boy
yeah,
involved?
there's that. But
I've only seen one episode of Gilmore Girls, and that was the pilot. And I think this is all the pilot, right?
yeah, I mean that's kind of like more of her like self-motivation thing, because that's also a good school and it's like better than the school in her town, but like more specifically there's like stuff later on about like, having being like a debutante and like, learning how to be a lady, and like it's like embarrassing to not do that kind of thing, and they even like they talk about that in that show where it's like, oh, her mom didn't do it and that was like sort of shameful because like she was like a young mom, and like that's kind of the same feeling I'm getting here, where it's like there's a specific kind of like old money expectation to be like, oh, you need to act this certain way, you need to like hit these certain milestones, represent us as like high society or
You have
important.
to also mingle with high society so we can get more connections.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what they're expecting from Rachel. I get why that is important, I guess, but like at the same time, plot wise, I feel like there was tons of ways in which Rachel could have been like, "Oh, I'll go."
Here's the thing, though, and it's one of those things that's like, you have to put Rachel in a situation where she has to be in some type of danger to make the stakes rise higher. Again, she's on an island on the beach. The only thing they can do is do something that's the most awful thing for a kid, and it's go to school. Bump, bump, bump. Like, things like that. Like,
Yeah. I mean, it's not just school, but I see what you're saying.
she's trading her own happiness to make sure that Percy Jackson's okay. She doesn't even know what's happening.
Right. It's more of like an important metaphorical thing, right? It doesn't really matter that she could have come up with another reason.
Which blows my mind. Like, people, why don't they like Rachel? Like, I think she's sacrificing more than Annabeth in this situation.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's I think it's interesting in this chapter we get both of like the quote unquote like love interest, whatever you could call them, for Percy, making various types of sacrifices for him. In the case of Annabeth, she would like literally jump in front of a bullet for him. She would get stabbed for him so that way he was safe. Rachel would like trade away her freedom as like this sort of like free spirit person who does what she wants, and instead would go to like this frou-frou school that her dad wants her to go to, just so that way she can go and help Percy. Like it's kind of like sad in a way that there's so many situations where like Percy's loved ones have to like make sacrifices to help him. It's like a very upsetting situation.
The way I'm looking at this is like a good example of like, what is love? Like, is it a physical thing or is it a mental thing? Which is something that comes a lot of in this chapter, because you have Annabeth who's like sacrificing like the physical, like she got herself stabbed, whereas like Rachel, she's gonna trade her own happiness and like pretty much her whole future.
Right, she's trading like more of like an intangible emotional
Yes, which is
thing.
interesting because you have the, two types of like what makes a relationship. You have the physical part of the relationship, then you have the mental part of the relationship, which I find to be so fascinating.
And that I think that kind of represents what Annabeth and Rachel, how they function in Percy's life. Like Rachel is so much about like ideas, and they like really connect on like how like vivacious and like free spirited she is, I guess. Like that has like a good effect on Percy. And then Annabeth, she's like more pragmatically involved in Percy's life, where she's like always there to like help him in battle. And I guess that also is like the function of like both who she is and the context within which she knows him. Like they're in camp, they're fighting battles, they're like in a situation where it's like more like her strategy and like her ability to physically protect Percy is very important to their friendship/relationship.
Yeah, they're forging friendships and relationships through war, whereas like Rachel is forging her relationship and friendship with Percy through pretty much him being his mortal side and being just trying to be a sense of normalcy.
Be like a normal kid. Yeah, exactly. Like experiencing like the world, like culture and things like that.
Which I find that to be so much better. Like when we look at this book series and you look at that, like it's interesting. Like we look at this, and we analyze it, and that Rick Riordan is like, would they, won't they type of situation. But it's like to most people, without spoiling anything, like you can see like, okay, Percy Jackson's gonna have to make a choice one way or another because Rachel's coming to town, and also Annabeth is mortally wounded. So it's interesting to find out what's gonna happen here, because it's like, Percy Jackson's gonna have to make the ultimate choice. It isn't just, he can't solve it with a sword.
There is something about Percy though that makes people just like make all sorts of sacrifices for him. Do you know what I mean? That's like kind of fascinating.
Like his mom, Tyson, Grover.
Right. He's kind of like a
Annabeth.
bumbling idiot, but like people keep being like, all right, I'm going to stick my neck out for you, dude. I'm going to like die for you. I'll jump in front of a knife. You know what I mean? Like it's like that Bruno Mars song. It's like,
I'll take a grenade.
Jump in front of a train for you.
Oh, I thought it was a grenade.
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. But it's interesting.
Well, there's a lot of things that are described in that.
Oh, okay.
In that song, right?
I think so. I haven't listened to that song. I just remember the tune. But yeah, it's an interesting thing that we have here. I love how these go, and how like, yes, there's some silly stuff that happens with Rachel and her parents. Yes, we have the horrible tragedy with Nico. But I think those are like small potatoes compared to like Percy Jackson waking up and finding out that there's a Titan on his doorstep with a white flag of truce. And Kronos has some demands. Like that's small potatoes.
Yeah, so that's a weird cliffhanger. There's a lot going on, basically. It's kind of funny. I always like wonder how Rick Riordan decides to name his chapters, because like the focus of like Rachel making a bad deal, which is the name of this chapter, I guess that's important. I don't know if I would necessarily deem it the most important thing that happens in the chapter.
Well, you can easily name this chapter Nico Goes Out with a Bang.
Exactly. You could name it any number of things. You could name it something about like it Annabeth or whatever. You could name it something about, whatever's going on in battle with Talia or with Grover. Like all of these things are very important to the plot. It's just like kind of fascinating that the focus was the Rachel dream sequence, which isn't really much of the chapter at all.
I have a theory about this, B, when it comes to how Rick Riordan names all of his Percy Jackson chapters, is that he writes the chapter first and then finds something, either like a joke that he has, or he really thinks about, he zeroes in on, yeah.
And just zeroes in on that as the title. Yeah, that's true. A lot of times it doesn't necessarily mean it's the most important part of the chapter. I think it's just a little detail. And that's why it's always fascinating to guess what's happening next based on the chapter title. Because a lot of times I'll like assume that that's like a very important aspect of what happens in the chapter. And that might happen in like the first paragraph of that chapter, and then there's other stuff that happens afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally agree with you with that. I think it's funny, like thinking about like Rick Riordan, because if you've ever watched any interviews with him, he's such a jovial man. Like he's really fun to like have an interview with, just because like he's just really upbeat. And then him sitting there like thinking of these chapter titles, but also like writing this depressing stuff sometimes. It's fascinating to me. Like he really like gets into it. And it's interesting because we have this stuff. I think some of my favorite parts are the chapter titles because they're so vague, but you know what's going to be happening in the chapter. It's eventually going to make sense. So it's going to click.
Well, yeah, I mean, in retrospect, they always make sense, but it's like it's kind of interesting that a lot happens in this chapter, not just the Rachel stuff.
Maybe that might be the biggest thing in this chapter because we're looking at this small bits at a time.
Right, that's true. Or like, who knows? Maybe like by Percy's standards, like that's what's most important to him.
You're looking at this and you're looking at Nico's dream. That's something that happened in the past. Rachel's decision is right now in the future. It's going to be affecting because she's coming into danger.
What's most important though about the Rachel thing, it's kind of like a misdirection. It's not well, the fact that she makes the bad deal with her dad. It like that's obviously sucks for her, and that's complicated for her character, but what's so much more important to the plot and relevant to Percy is the weird stuff going on with like his name and probably some sort of like prophecy about something going like is that just her like having a vision about what's going on now, and now she knows that like New York is frozen in time or whatever, or was that like some sort of like window into another bad thing happening that he doesn't even know about? Like that, I don't even know what that represents.
Oh, you're saying like she had a prophecy?
I don't know if she had a prophecy, but there was like these weird like writings that she did that had Percy's name in it, and then she's like, "Oh no, Percy's in trouble." It's like, was that her figuring out just the baseline amount of trouble that has been happening these past few chapters, or is there something even worse to come that she knows because she has this like weird sort of gift of seeing through the mist?
Well, all we know is that Percy Jackson wakes up, and by the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this way comes, as there's a Titan right outside of the Plaza Hotel holding like a white banner, which right now is bad.
Yeah, flag of truce is, if I recall, pretty sure that, that Luke also had a flag of truce when he talked to Annabeth.
Yes, he did.
Right?
Yeah, this is parlay.
So we can't necessarily trust that.
This is more like parlay. And like, okay, bring me to the captain. We're gonna speak of terms. Like it's truth.
Right, exactly. They're not necessarily surrendering.
No, they're doing a parlay. So B, what is the name of the next chapter?
Name of the next chapter. Oh geez. Well, a Titan brings me a present. Which
I hope it's an iPhone.
I mean, we knew that a Titan showed up. What could the present possibly be? I can't even begin to tell you what that was.
I hope it's an iPhone, maybe a hoverboard.
I don't even know what Titan it is or where they're coming from, where their allegiances lie. Probably Kronos. It is a Titan.
Maybe it could be Bob. That'd be fun.
That would be fun. Well, then he wouldn't have any allegiances because he'd be like, "You're my friend. I'm Bob." Anyway, he doesn't remember anything.
Oh man, look at these spooky guys over here. Who knows?
All right. Well, that's a pretty vague thing. I mean, we kind of already were speculating about what's happening with the Titan. Beyond that, I don't even know which Titan it is or what's going on, so I can't say exactly. Obviously, other follow-up stuff is going to happen. I think that hopefully Annabeth is going to eventually get better. I don't think that they're going to, like, sort of have her
kill over,
gradually die off. Yeah, like, there's something that would be extremely weird if she, like, was injured a couple chapters ago and she just, like,
succumbed to her wounds.
Died. Like, yeah, like, that would just, I don't know, I feel like that's not how Annabeth is going to go out. If she does end up dying, I think it would be in a little bit more of a fanfare than her just, like, in the Plaza Hotel, like, dying of gangrene. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes. The gangrene. They're going to have to get a bone saw and maybe, like, a popsicle stick.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think that... I think Annabeth's going to be okay, hopefully. I think, I don't know, Rachel's hopefully going to show up eventually now that she's made this decision with her dad.
Yeah, because they gassed up the plane. They're going to fly to New York.
That's true. They did decide to do that. So they're probably going to be there pretty soon.
I don't know what's going to happen because here's the problem, though, is like once they get to New York, those pilots are going to go to sleep or they're going to be turned around.
Right. And then they're just going to like freaking crash to the ground. And that's not... Yeah, that maybe didn't think that one through.
Oh no, see, that's like another thing, like a problem though, is like Percy Jackson probably would think about this. Wait, she's flying in the air. Oh no.
Right, Zeus. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why this might not work out. They're kind of like waiting for a lot of reinforcements. Ideally, Rachel shows up and everything's fine. I don't exactly know how she's going to help. She does have the gift of seeing through the mist, even more so than Percy, for whatever reason. So that might be of some advantageous battle strategy, or who knows how she's going to help.
Oh, is she gonna start flying the plane like those pilots are gonna be asleep and she's still gonna be cognitive? Oh no.
Right. Though she would have to like get some celestial bronze bullets like Annabeth's dad.
Oh no, they're probably in like a special just a jet. There's no bullets on the jet.
No, I know that. I'm joking. Yeah, there's a lot of kind of like follow-up stuff. Like we're still waiting on Clarice. I don't think she's going to show up next chapter. I think that that's going to be kind of like this long con or whatever, like this Chekhov's gun thing of like she's going to be lurking in the background of like, oh well, I hope Clarice comes and help, and then like last minute she's going to bust through with her chariot and have like all of the Ares cabin.
Is it gonna be like the storming of the Pacific with MacArthur? Like he's like walking out with like some swagger. Oh man.
Yeah, I feel like they're just sort of like, holding her back as like a narrative point and then going to be like, oh, haha, here she is to help. It's like, I don't know, it feels all very constructed and silly a little bit because like I know that she's going to eventually help. So it's like, I don't know.
See, this is where like she like steals some like Harrier jets and they load them up with celestial bronze bullets.
Yeah, like it feels a little bit like I said, like a bit of like a manufactured tension. Like I think even Clarice at some point would cave to this. Like she even was given the chariot she was fighting about. She's friends with Percy. It just feels like beyond the pale of what I would expect from her as a character.
What I'm imagining in my head is she's going to be there at the 11th hour and you're going to either hear Flight of the Valkyries or you're going to hear like Twisted Sister or some Joan Jett as they like come down in a helicopter.
Right, exactly. I don't know. It's just inevitable she's going to show up. I don't know if it's going to be next chapter. It might be a little bit later during like a more important kind of battle sequence or something. Yeah, it's hard to say what's going to happen, but there's like a lot of sort of characters that are off doing different projects. There's some very dejected characters like Talia and Grover who've, seen some pretty bad stuff. I mean, that has a lot to do with the spy too. The spy is something we need to contend with because like no matter what they do, if that spy is in their ranks, they're probably not going to do very well because Kronos is just going to forever keep hearing about what their battle plans are. So it's not looking up really. It's not quite looking up for the characters.
It's gonna be hopefully good or maybe bad, but who knows? So B, you want to read some listener emails?
So we got one email this week who says, Zack and B, I think you should probably read the Heroes of Olympus series by narrator instead of by chapter because it would go a lot faster. That's kind of a good point. And then there's this big part redacted, which I guess Zack had to hide from me plot-wise. The end, that was short. Oh, look, a squirrel. I'm ADHD, also gay, keep horsing around.
I love your spunk,
something just so
kid.
great about that sign-off. Thank you. I mean, that pretty much sums up our audience,
yeah.
I think.
Hey, I love that person's spunk. But the redacted part, what I'll say about that is, because I can say this, is that I did not know that because I haven't paid attention to the book series long enough, because I've only read those two series once, and both of them were many, many years ago. So when we read them, I'll be like, oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
We might consider doing Heroes of Olympus by narrator. I need to see how it's broken up, and then we'll probably...
It's how you think it is. It's going to be really interesting.
Right. We'll have to like sort of strategize what would be the best way to talk about it on the podcast.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it the once over B and decide how's the best way to do it. Sometimes I think we might break up multiple chapters instead of, because that one's there's different viewpoint characters. We're going to play it by ear. We'll get to it when we get to it. We'll have a decision by the end of The Last Olympian. That's something that's on everyone's mind, and we hear you, we respect you.
We also don't want to just be reading things forever in a way that's like not productive for the story. Like if reading it by narrator is like a better way to analyze it, then that might be an option, but we'll figure it out.
We might schedule something. I have some friends that have specialized in this, so who knows? We'll figure that out. We didn't get any Apple Podcast reviews. That's okay. Everyone was busy this week, or they were fighting monsters or minotaurs or everything in between.
Yeah.
But thank you guys
a beach. I hope they were on a beach like Rachel.
Everyone was on a beach. I hope everyone was on a beach. I hope you guys are having fun this time of year.
Yeah. Yeah, in the dead of winter. I'm having fun, but it's still quite cold and desolate.
It's quite lovely in Los Angeles. It's about 60 degrees every day.
I don't need you to be bragging about that.
Oh, sorry. I'm humble bragging about that. Though, B, we did get a good announcement if we're going to humble brag a little bit.
Well, and what would that be?
We got into the top 50 book podcast on Apple Podcasts.
True. Yeah, that's really exciting. When you sent me that, I kind of could believe what you were saying. Like, obviously I believed you, but it's still kind of hard to wrap my mind around.
I think we were like literally 50 out of 100. It was great. Like, what?
Yeah, which is amazing. Yeah, so we're like we're charting on the literature charts on Apple Podcasts, which is really awesome, which means a lot of you guys out there are listening and telling friends and everything, and we really appreciate that. Yeah, I really feel like more and more people are finding our show, and that makes me really happy. I hope, we're doing these books a good service, and that we're like, analyzing them in a way that you find, I don't know, worthwhile and interesting. And
B, it's kind of crazy because I was looking at this and I was just like, I've never thought in a million years would be like up there in the podcast stuff. Like, we do our show for fun. We don't, I hardly look at our numbers. Like, the only times I really look at our numbers is like if someone asks for something like sponsorship wise, or like if I
right,
have
exactly, yeah, to sort of quantify it. But it's, I mean, obviously our listeners have always meant a lot, regardless of how many there were. But it's, I really do feel like, even in the past couple months, a lot of people have been finding our show and have been giving really great feedback and, telling us what they think about different characters or plot points or different analysis we've had on the show. And we really appreciate it. It's awesome that you guys care about what we're doing.
It's crazy because I'm looking at today. Today was actually if I was still working at Disney, my 4-year anniversary. And I remember I had quit on my third year, my 3rd year anniversary. And I remember leaving Disney and like being like really mad and upset because I had to leave for various reasons that I won't get into. And I just remember like looking at the castle and being like, when I come back the next time, I'm going to be much happier. I'm going to be more successful in some way, shape, or form. And I went to Disneyland yesterday. I went to go to Galaxy's Edge. I actually went to Black Spire Outpost, or Batu.
Yeah, you sent me the picture of you.
And it's crazy because I look at my life now. It's like how interesting that my life has gotten, especially with like how hard both of us have worked. Like, we've been friends for almost 3 to 4 years at this point. And it's nuts.
I mean, a while now. I mean, even probably before that, because you were on Unfortunate Associates. So it's been like close to 4 years or something like that.
And I gotta congratulate you about that because you guys wrapped your show.
Yeah, we just finished, which is crazy.
Won't lie, I kind of cried.
No, yeah, I think Mia and I both like got a little bit emotional there because it's very surreal to end a podcast that you've like worked really hard on, and it's like, in a lot of ways, that's why we were putting off doing those episodes for a while, because it just like it seemed so difficult to like let go of that show. But yeah, I'm happy that we've finished it the right way, and I'm like moving forward with like other cool stuff, and Mia's moving forward with like her other podcasts. But yeah, it's really weird to do a show and put a lot of work in, and then people, have like all sorts of different ways that they appreciate it, and it's affected them in different ways. And, now we've started getting emails and reviews from people for this show in the same capacity. And obviously I feel like this show has kind of even more years to come because of just sort of like
the subject matter.
The function of the stuff that we're talking about. We have like a lot of material to cover. So I can't even like imagine like looking forward to like when we're going to eventually wrap up this show.
I don't even know what we're going to do. I feel like if we're
I don't even know when we're going to do that or how that's going to happen. It's way in the future, but that's the way I felt when I started Unfortunate Associates. And like now that it's like over, and it's like, that's when I started podcasting. Basically, that was my first podcast. It's like, it's very weird to look back on that.
What I'll say about this, B, is that if we're going to go out, B, like once we have our last podcast, this is going to sound really awesome. I think we should go with a bang and not a whimper. I think we should have a big old block party.
Yeah, something. Who knows? I mean, we're probably going to be really old when we're done.
I'll be able to use my like Social Security at that point to fund this whole thing.
No, exactly. Yeah, we're all gonna like be having a retirement party or something, and like you and I are gonna be like in our 80s, and all of the people there are gonna be in their 60s because we have children listeners.
We'll be, whether you're talking about like, I'll be like wholly decrepit, and you're still gonna be your elf age.
That's true. I am just going to look 100% like a little leprechaun or something. So,
And hopefully, if we can get our sponsor, Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville, to sponsor the whole event, I'd be happy with that. Jimmy Buffett was obviously will put his brain into a margarita machine, so we'll always have Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah. Anyway, whenever we reach milestones like this, it's really crazy. It's actually like, especially like serendipitous timing for that because we're very close to our, what is it now, 2-year anniversary for the podcast?
2-year anniversary is next month. I think it's the 12th or the 13th.
Yeah, well, like, because our intro episode though was like pretty close to around this time, like late January, early February was when we recorded it.
And it's crazy that we're just about to finish the books. Like I remember sitting in my old room talking about it. Like I had like this soundproof box, and now I'm sitting in like a booth. It's dumb. Like it's really weird to think about. Like it almost makes me a little giddy at times. And one of these days, we'll have another live episode. I think I would love to do like an actual like episode where fans can come in or at least watch it live and do it that way. Though we're still hell bent on getting hopefully Rick Riordan. Like if you're listening out there, if you're Rick Riordan's publicist, we're now in the top 50 book podcasts. Hello. Anyone there?
Hi. Hello.
Please.
We would like to talk
We'd
to you.
love to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the really awesome thing about how much content we have for this podcast is that we're like really looking forward to the future and like what we can do with it, what we're going to do with bonus episodes. I know that we've been talking off mic a lot about different bonus episodes that we're thinking about for the Patreon. We've been talking a lot about like other fun little weird episodes we can do here on the main feed that might not just be talking about the chapters. Like there's so much stuff to cover and like different things we're excited about. So yeah, I'm really glad that you guys are liking what we're doing.
We love you all. You are all the best campers. I think someone finally coined the term of what our listeners are, and I'm going to coin it and say it's just campers.
Campers is good, yeah. I mean, we do say good morning campers in the beginning, so it kind of fits.
Yeah, so I think you are all of our campers. I love you all. Like, it's really weird to think about, like, all these people. Like, 10-year-old Zach is probably crying right now just imagining all the friends he's made. And it's wonderful. I love you all the most.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Thank you, guys.
So, B, where can they find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at bkellygorman, and you can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com.
If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Suda41, that's SUDA41. If you want to follow our show on Twitter, that's at halfblood_radio. We have an email, radiocamphalfblood@gmail.com. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/radiocamphalfblood. We have some episodes possibly coming up very soon. For the new year, let's look forward for that. We have t-shirts available at TeePublic. We want to thank our sponsors, Dashlane. Thank you so much. Well, guys, I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And let's keep staying mortal. See ya.
Bye.